Okay, I am ready. I'm going. Thank you.
As an opportunity that God had taken to build something into him that he could not have had apart from the suffering. What God told Paul simply was this: you will not be without the grace to do your job. You will not be without the strength to be my ambassador. But the creative difference will be this: your weakness will serve to magnify the glory of God's power in such a way that nobody will ever again be able to explain you in human terms. It is as if Paul looks ahead and sees himself as a human tabernacle in which the Shekinah glory has come to dwell in. And never again can he ever be the same, because the disruptive moment, this bump in the road, this bend around which he could not see, has been a messenger from God to help him see that in his weakness in the flesh, he becomes a receptacle for the power of God in a way that he had never, ever known before. I think if I understand the nature of Paul, that he's like a lot of us men who think we can do it. I mean, we're indestructible, we're invulnerable. I have to tell you that one of the most awesome things about the experience that I've had has been getting in touch with my own mortality and beginning to realize that I'm not Superman and that I don't have control of my own destiny, but it lies in the hands of somebody else. And in the moment of weakness, we began to understand that God is just waiting to walk into the empty place left when we walk out, so that he can fill us with his power. And the product of this suffering, this pain in Paul's life, was the product of more power. Now notice the perspective, number 5, of this disruptive moment. Paul says, finally, most gladly, therefore, will I boast in my infirmities, for I want the power of Christ to rest on me. It's almost as if Paul, looking back on this, realizes what he was like before this happened to him and what he has become like after this has happened to him. And he says, in essence, and you can't get anything out of the passage other than this, if I could go back to the way it was before and not have to walk through this disruptive moment, I wouldn't do it for all the money in the world, because what God has made out of me on the other side of this bump in the road is so incredible to me. I glory in it. I boast in it. I thank God for it. Now, I need to tell you, you can only do that when you're looking back on it. It's hard to do that when you're in the midst of it. But I take great hope in Paul's testimony because I believe it with all of my heart. He looks at the picture of Christ's power and he rejoices. Now, that's all I want to say about 2 Corinthians 12, but you will be amazed, as I was, to discover how very closely the pattern follows in Hebrews 12. So turn there. Hebrews chapter 12. Now, once again, if Paul is the writer of Hebrews, we can understand the parallelism, but even if he is not, it is striking to notice that the outline for this passage is exactly the same as the outline for 2 Corinthians 12. First of all, there is the purpose of the disruptive moment. Paul says that God allows chastening, he allows training in our lives that we might be corrected, to correct us as a father corrects his son, and that he might prove to us that into whether or not he truly is a member of the family of God. Notice the pain in this disruptive moment again in Hebrews 12. Paul describes it like this. He calls it chastening and rebuking and scourging and correcting. And then I love this little phrase, not joyful, but painful. Very, isn't it? There is no desire on the part of the Almighty God or the Spirit of God to disguise what he is doing. He is not trying to say, if you just smile and think positive thoughts, this will go away and you won't feel it. So sad is the teaching that we have about us today, that if we love God and we walk with him, we will never be sick, we will never have suffering, we will never have poverty, we will never have any disease in our life. We will never have any of that. That is not from the Word of God. The Word of God is brutally honest about the reality of life, and that sometimes in the process of growing up in God's family, we feel the sting of the whip. And it doesn't feel good, and we would not really desire it, but God has a purpose in it. And when you feel it, one of the things you can do is stand up straight and say, so I am a son. I am a son. I am in the family. It's the proof of God's love for us. Notice the provision of the disruptive moment. Once again in the passage, God reminds us that when we are under the scourging of the Father, He treats us as a father treats a son. He says in our earthly days, our parents do this for their good, but when God does this, He does it for our good because He loves us. And in the midst of the disruptive moment, when we face the bend in the road, God is right there with us, taking us along the pathway. There's another wonderful passage that I had hoped to share, but there wasn't enough time in this lesson, and that's John 15, and you can read that when you get a chance. In that passage, the Lord uses a parable about the vineyard. And do you remember what He said? He said, every branch that brings forth good fruit, the Lord purges it so that it might bring forth more fruit. The branches that don't bring forth any fruit are not really in the vine. They're cast away. But the branches that bring forth fruit, the Bible says God the Father is the vine dresser, and He comes down and walks among His vineyard, and He goes along the vines and He snips off the unproductive branches so all of the sap and all of the strength can flow through to the vine that is being productive. And the result is, when it's all finished, it is more fruitful than it was before. But let me tell you what I remember about that passage most of all, this little statement. I don't know who it is attributed to, but it is very clear to me that it is the truth. It goes like this: the vine dresser is never nearer the branches than when he is pruning them. Oh, the provision of God in the disruptive moments of our lives. And then finally, look at the product of it. The product of the disruptive moment, he says in Hebrews 12, is that we become partakers of His holiness, and that afterward, this process yields in us the peaceable fruit of righteousness. Do you see this? In 2 Corinthians 12, the goal is more power. In Hebrews 12, the goal is more holiness and righteousness. There isn't any way to get from point A to point B without going through the disruptive moment. But when you come out on the other side, there's more power and there's more holiness. That's the product that God is after. And then finally, just as in 2 Corinthians 12, notice here in Hebrews 12, the perspective of the disruptive moment. How are we to respond to this? Hebrews is very clear about it. In the quotation from Proverbs 3:11 and 12, which is in the 5th verse, the writer of Hebrews says, my son, don't despise the chastening of the Lord. One of the options you have is to despise it. Why has this happened to me? Why now? Why this? I'm so angry that God. Have you ever met somebody who's mad at God because of something that's happened in their life? They despise the chastening. That's not the right perspective. Keep reading. It says, don't be discouraged when you're rebuked. Some people just get discouraged. They just put their head down and they say, well, that's it. I'm giving up. This is all over. It's final. What I'm trying to say is this: when you go through a disruptive moment, if you're not careful, you can just say, oh, shoot, this is it, and I'm done, and it's finished, and I'm just going to hang my head and give up. And the Bible says, when you have a disruptive moment, don't be discouraged. Well, what are you supposed to do? Look at the end of the 11th verse. It says that when you go through a disruptive moment, it will yield the peaceable fruit of righteousness. Now, here's the key to the whole thing: to those who have been trained by it. That's the key. The key isn't, why has this happened to me? Or what am I going to do? The key is, Lord, what do you want to teach me in this disruptive moment? And I stand as your ready student and pupil, and you just teach me everything you can teach me. I don't want to waste this suffering. I want to walk through it and come out on the other side having learned everything I can learn in this process. I want to tell you something. I read the Bible in a different way. I read books in a different way. I pray in a different way. All of this is a part of the way God trains us when we go through a bend in the road. Now, do you see 2 Corinthians 12 and Hebrews 12 are almost exactly alike? The outline is exactly the same. And out of these two passages come some very poignant principles for disruptive moments, and let me give them to you. This is what I want you to hear so very clearly. You say, well, I haven't had any disruptive moments in my life. Well, just hang on. Just hang on. Be patient, because they'll come. It's impossible. You say, what a morbid outlook on life. No, you know what? People are always talking about whether you're an optimist or you're a pessimist. And I don't think either one of those make any difference. What you need to be is a realist, right? Reality is what counts. Some people say, well, if you're optimistic, you won't ever have any bumps in the road. Yes, you will. You surely will. So what do you do when you have a disruptive moment? First of all, let me just put this in your heart. Principle number one, disruptive moments are often divine appointments. You remember how Job was buffeted by Satan, but Satan had to get permission to come and do anything he was allowed to do. Can Satan do damage to a saint? Yes, he can, but he can only do the damage that God's going to allow. So ultimately, everything that happens to us is filtered through the hands of a loving God. Hebrews 12 is even clearer. Hebrews 12 tells us that the suffering is like unto a father who is chastising his son. Who is the father in the passage? It's God himself. And it says to us that these moments that are disruptive in our lives, these things that catch us off guard, they come from God. I think that's one of the most important insights that God gave me during that time. I wasn't there by accident. God had put me there. He had allowed me to go through that time. I think there are many reasons for that we'll uncover as we go through this month. One of them I really believe happened was that God softened my heart. He helped me to see people in pain in a way I'd never seen it before. I could feel it in my spirit, and that often happens. The Bible says that God comforts us in a way so that when we're comforted, we can comfort others. And we learn how to comfort others by the fact that we have been comforted ourselves. That truth happened. It'll happen for you. Hey, don't forget to ask for the resource when you send your gift this month. It's Sleep on This. It's a really cool book that we created just for you. We'd like you to have it, and don't forget to join us tomorrow for part 2 of A Bend in the Road. Information on Dr. Jeremiah's series, When Your World Falls Apart, please visit our website, where you'll also find 2 free ways to help you stay connected: our monthly magazine, Turning Points, and our daily email devotional. Sign up today at davidjeremiah.org/radio. That's davidjeremiah.org/radio. Or call us at 800-947-1993. Ask for your copy of David's book, Sleep on This, a nighttime devotional with biblical reflections to bring you peace and rest. It's yours for a gift of any amount. You can also purchase the Jeremiah Study Bible in the English Standard, New International, and New King James versions, with notes and articles from Dr. Jeremiah's decades of study. Get all the details when you visit our website, davidjeremiah.org/radio. This is David Michael Jeremiah. Join us tomorrow as we continue the series, When Your World Falls Apart, on Turning Point with Dr. David Jeremiah.
Don't forget, when you get in touch with this program, please let them know that you listen to their broadcast on American Family Radio. Thanks.
90.5 KTXG, Greenville, Dallas.
American Family Association, a ministry with a mission to inform, equip, and activate people like you to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in her task of fulfilling the Great Commission. We couldn't do it without your day-to-day support. American Family Association. Find us online at afa.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Pugh. Former Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer testified before the House Oversight Committee that President Biden had been involved in his son's business dealings in the past. Archer claims Hunter put his father on the phone at least 20 times while meeting with international business partners to help, quote, sell the brand to executives. Committee Chairman James Comer says Biden has always lied and is still lying.
The evidence continues to mount, and today we saw Joe Biden has lied to the American people. He knew exactly who his son was getting those millions and millions of dollars of wires from, and he
Senator Congressman Jim Jordan says he and his colleagues plan to investigate this issue further, and it further explains why Hunter Biden's plea deal was rejected by a district court judge last week.
She, I think, laid it out how wrong it was that they tried to put together this type of deal, and I think that demonstrates how the Justice Department has been, frankly, turned against the American people and not applying the law in an equal manner.
Sam Dewey is an attorney and former House and Senate investigator. Here's his takeaway.
Two things. The first is that it is extraordinary because it completely destroys Joe Biden's narrative, had no idea, never talked to my son, was just not involved. Joe Biden either very much was involved and knew what he was doing or was an ostrich with his head in the sand. It's one thing to say hello to your son's business partners. You don't just get on an open speakerphone with your son's business partners when you're the vice president and control the policy those business partners want to influence.
Illinois Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker signed a bill into law that allows non-U.S. citizens to become police officers in the state. Illinois House Bill 3751 will no longer require U.S. citizenship as a qualification to become a police officer. Chicago Alderman Anthony Napolitano wonders what other requirements will be dropped.
This is going to set a standard now that you're going to be looking at non-residents, non-citizens of the United States that are going to be locking up citizens of the United States. What else are they going to remove from the standards of these tests? Are they going to remove the required education level that you're supposed to have?
Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is responding to a big-time GOP donor who claims he is a flawed candidate. That donor is saying, quote, he clearly doesn't understand the game. When you get into these culture wars the way he has, the vast majority of people don't understand what they are. Here's Ron DeSantis responding.
Well, it's obviously nonsense. I govern boldly. I govern unapologetically. I delivered big results. I would push back. When I hear about, culture war, standing up for the rights of parents, standing up for the well-being of children, that's not some, quote, culture war. That is central to the lives of tens of millions of people throughout this country.
Tempers were flaring at a recent Chino Valley, California school board meeting as the board enacted a parental notification of so-called transgender children on a 4-1 vote. Bob Kellogg reports.
Greg Bird of the California Family Council says the policy represents pushback against the education establishment that excluded parents from decision-making during the COVID pandemic. He says the packed hours-long meeting was attended both by angry supporters and opponents of the policy.
When California has the Department of Ed encouraging school districts to hide from parents if a child wants to change their gender identity, teachers are being instructed to keep that secret. All of that is making parents very uncomfortable.
Bird says Chino Valley is one of the districts in the state that wants more parental control of their children's education.
In this particular school district, they voted in some new school board members. And these school board members are now enacting policies to put the parents back in charge.
Bird notes that many other districts have shown interest in the Chino Valley results, and he hopes this type of parental action will spread across the country. I'm Bob Kellogg.
American Family News is online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFA is no longer dependent on Facebook or YouTube to live stream our original programming. As of now, American Family Radio shows like Today's Issues, The Court, Airing the Addisons, and The Hamilton Corner are streaming live on the AFA streaming app. Independent live streaming is the next step as we come out from among them and separate ourselves unto the Lord. Search AFA Streaming or visit streaming.afa.net to sign up.
Hi, I'm Robert Jeffress, and I'm glad to serve as your Bible teacher every day on this great radio station. On today's edition of Pathway to Victory. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to the beginning of Abraham's story. It's found at the end of Genesis chapter 11. We're beginning our study of Abraham, who was truly a most unlikely hero. If God can use Abraham, he can use anybody.
Welcome to Pathway to Victory with author and pastor Dr. Robert Jeffress. The Bible names Abraham as a standout man of faith, and for good reason. But did you realize that Abraham didn't start following God until he was 75 years old? Today on Pathway to Victory, Dr. Robert Jeffress shows us the moment when Abraham left his home and family and responded to the Lord's call. Now, here's our Bible teacher to introduce today's message. Dr. Jeffress?
Thanks, David, and welcome again to Pathway to Victory. The Bible teaches that Abraham died at a ripe old age, and he did so, and I'm quoting here, satisfied with life. Isn't that what all of us want? When we come to the end of our life, shouldn't it be great to look back with peace and contentment? Well, what's the secret? Today on Pathway to Victory, I'm presenting a brand new teaching series on the life of Abraham. By walking alongside this man of faith over the course of his entire life, we'll discover the key to a satisfied life. Over the next few weeks, our mission is to ignite a flame of passion in your heart so that you face every single challenge, every barrier in your life with courage and conviction. Let me be perfectly clear about this. Abraham was far from perfect. He made some mistakes.